So in this video, we are going to be discussing how to answer the explain question. Remember, your explain question requires you to include a description and a reason why. So what is the answer structure for an explain question? There's three parts to your answer for an explain question. The first part is your fact, and this is your description. So just exactly what you would write for a describe question, just a short sentence. You then want to stab your answer. So by using the words so, therefore, as, or because, that means that you're elevating your answer to an explain question. So once you write your description and then use one of those words, your answer will then naturally carry on into your explanation and into the third part of the answer, which is your consequence. And this is your reason why. Your top tips for perfecting your explanations. So the first thing is you always want to refer back to the question in your answer. It's always a good idea when you see the question, highlight the key words. So what is the question actually asking you about? The second thing is make sure to stab your answer. So make sure that you've got either so, therefore, as, or because in your answer. And most likely, if you've included that word, you will have explained your answer. And third, make sure that you keep practicing these questions and getting feedback on them. Make sure you're referring back to the mark schemes and exemplar answers so you can get an idea of the level of detail that you're meant to be including, some answers that you could be writing as well. The only way that you're going to improve is by practicing. So for example, if you were asked to explain ways to prevent anemia, so remember your fact is your short sentence, your description about how we can prevent anemia. So one way that we can prevent anemia is to increase our vitamin C intake. So that would be fine if you were just asked to describe how to prevent anemia, but we're being asked to explain. So how does increasing our vitamin C intake actually help to prevent anemia? So we're starting off our explanation with therefore, helping to absorb iron, helping to prevent anemia. So we've given our consequence, we've given our reason why vitamin C intake by increasing that will help to prevent anemia. We've also referred back to the question by saying it's going to help to prevent anemia. If we didn't have that in our answer, we wouldn't get a mark because we've not actually answered the question. Another example might be to explain the function of carbohydrates. So our fact, our short description of our function of carbohydrates is that they provide energy. So preventing tiredness. So sometimes our explanations are just quite simple, but remember we always want to give this consequence, this reason why we are doing this. So what is the reason for carbohydrates preventing energy? They will help to prevent tiredness. If we were to explain advice when baking to reduce the risk of food poisoning, so a fact that we could write down might be that we would store flour in a cool, dry cupboard. Therefore, so why would we want to do this? Therefore, bacteria are not given moisture to grow and multiply, so reducing food poisoning risk. Again, we've linked back to the question by stating that it's going to reduce the risk of food poisoning. If we were asked to explain a stage of food product development, so we want to name the stage of food product development and then give a short description of what goes on during that stage. So it might be during concept screening, ideas are narrowed down. But why would we want to narrow down these ideas? As it would be too expensive to take all of the ideas forward. We might be asked to explain why UHT foods may be used. So UHT foods are heated to a very high temperature for a short period of time. So we've given a short statement, a fact, a description about UHT foods. We're now going to go on to explain why that would help people choose them. So bacteria are killed and products are safer to eat. So that's a reason why people might want to choose UHT foods. We might be asked about consumers' choice of food. So in this instance, we're being asked to explain how budget may affect consumers' choice of food. So consumers on a low budget may choose more own brand foods due to them being cheaper. It's important that you are adding a bit of a description, a bit more detail into some of your answers. If we'd simply written consumers on a low budget may choose more own brand foods, you wouldn't get a mark for that because you've not stated why they would want to do that. So we're stating that they're going to be cheaper. However, we need to link back to that question about food choice. So we're explaining why these consumers are going to be choosing these cheaper own brand foods and how that's going to affect their food choice. Therefore, restricting their food choice because they've got a much narrower selection, a smaller selection of foods to choose from. And we've linked back to that question, we've taken the words directly from the question about food choice and put them into our consequence. In this next part of the video, we're going to think about some potential answers you might write down and you're not quite sure why they've not managed to get a mark. So we're going to look at improving these answers so that you do get a mark and you've fully explained your answers. So if your question was to explain how to reduce the risk of coronary heart disease, and you'd written the answer, eat less fat so there's less cholesterol clogging arteries, you would be correct. However, this isn't fully explained. If you look back at the question, it's asking you about coronary heart disease. If we look back at the answer, there's no mention of coronary heart disease in this answer. So it's really important that you're using your highlighter to highlight the key part of the question, which is coronary heart disease in this instance. So if we'd simply added in and reducing the risk of coronary heart disease, so that statement in purple, you would now get a mark for this answer as you've linked it back to the question. So it's really important that you are fully reading the question and highlighting the key parts. Another example. So if you had a question about current dietary advice, if you were given a meal and you were asked firstly to describe changes to meet current dietary advice, and then the second part of the question, explain how the change would help meet current dietary advice. So for part one, we said we could change the white baguette to wholemeal. That would be fine, you would get a mark for that as you were describing these changes. The second part of the question is explaining how this change would help meet current dietary advice. Now, by writing this will increase fibre, this is correct, but it's not fully explained and it's not linked back to the question. So remember, we always want to stab our answers, and that means that we are fully explaining our answers. So we've chosen the word so in this instance, and we want to link it back to the question. So meeting current dietary advice. However, it's not sufficient to just say meeting current dietary advice. We need to actually say what piece of current dietary advice we're meeting. So by changing the white baguette to wholemeal, this will increase fibre, so meeting current dietary advice to increase fibre to 30 grams per day. At National 5 level, it's really important that whenever you're asked about current dietary advice, you are saying what the specific dietary goal is. So that is the grams or percentages that we're meant to be increasing or decreasing each day or each week. So just going back to your top tips for perfecting your explanations. Remember, you always want to refer back to the question in your answer. So highlight if you're meant to be referring back to current dietary advice or food choice or reducing the risk of food poisoning. Secondly, make sure that you are fully explaining your answers. A good technique is to stab your answer. So use the words so, therefore, as and because, and then hopefully you would naturally write your reason why after you've included one of those words. And thirdly, make sure you keep practicing, get feedback, and that's the only way that you will improve.